Now, there are, of course, all the cliche, bumper sticker ridden approaches that address this topic. Is the famous line, they say comes from France, that the enemy of good is perfect. Most people think the enemy of good is bad. Really, the enemy of good is perfect, that if you try to perfect things, you end up not getting anything done. So in the language of today's, in the parlance of today's lingo, you have, or lingo and parlance are actually synonymous. You have the concept of everything being in beta form, constantly being developed, constantly being improved. And let's not wait till things are perfect. So that's a general rule that everybody understands, and that is the idea that you cannot keep on trying to create the highest standards and not get anything done. You do something, and then you perfect it, and you improve it, and you tweak it, and you modify it, and you review it, and you analyze it, and so on. All the different steps in any type of business plan or any type of implementation of any project. But I want to discuss it a little deeper than that, in the style of the Meaningful Life Center's formula and approach, which is really gets to the heart of why some of us are perfectionists, what's the drive within us for success, what really is success. Because at the end of the day, we all have our different mechanisms. Every person has their triggers and have their knee-jerk reactions, you can call them, reflexes. Some of these reflexes are innate, we're born with them. Some of them we develop, we pick up from our parents, from our educators, from our societies, from our environments. But regardless, once they become reflexes, you can also call them habits or patterns or routines. They become the way we react to things. Something disturbs us, we react usually how we've seen those that shaped us, our role models, react. Whether it's for the good or for the bad, whether we react with anger, whether we have patience, whether we have impatience. I mean, just to go through, give a few examples. So, generally speaking, how we deal with things is going to very often gravitate back to our reflexes, our impulses. Now, of course, anybody can be trained. You see people who have very unhealthy habits, and then with training and education, and with maybe a boot camp or two, they learn to modify that, or sometimes radically. That is correct. But as long as one has not done that, we're usually going to gravitate back to our natural reflexes, natural or nurtured, nature versus nurture, which sometimes can be very similar in the way it becomes embedded in our so-called, I don't call it DNA, but embedded in our reactions. So definitely things can be changed, but the most important thing is that in order to change things, you have to really get to the root of it. And this goes back to the topic I speak about a lot, which is the difference between symptomatic medicine and remedial medicine and root medicine, we'll call it, preventive, to get to the root of issue as opposed to treating the symptoms alone. So when it comes to these issues of perfectionism and all the impediments that presents and success in general, it's very important to be able to really get not just to the general idea of just do something and then perfect it, which of course is, you don't need a whole class for that, that becomes pretty obvious, but it really comes down to how we ingrain within ourselves a type of new approach in dealing with what success is, dealing with our ambitions, dealing with perfecting things, because even if someone doesn't call themselves a perfectionist, they definitely want to do things in the best possible way. Yes, some of us are lazy and some of us try to get away by cutting corners, but nevertheless, most people would say, yes, if I apply myself to something, I'd like to believe that I'm doing the best I can. So this is what we'll be addressing in the context of, as I said, getting also into we'll call the inner fibers, the inner workings of what shapes and defines our drive for success, perfectionism itself, and so on. So, psychologically speaking, often the drive to be perfect, what some people call perfectionists, is often really something as a result of not necessarily healthy factors. It could very well be a person who growing up under a lot of criticism, parents who were very critical, or a parent that was very critical, or other formative forces in our lives that were very demanding as I said, critical, often cause a person to constantly feel they have to please, they have to perfect, they have to do something perfect, and they're terrified of doing something that may not be perceived as perfect in the eyes of the people that needed to validate them. And this is very deep for a child. This is not a small matter, because children, if you look at their parents, they look for that approval, they look for that validation, and when they don't get it, besides the fact that it's disappointing to them, they begin to have to say, okay, what can I do more to get this going, to do it better, to make them happy, to make the people that love me or I love them happy. Now, in a healthy sense, there's always the need to encourage a child, encourage a person to grow and not just be satisfied with a mediocre or something that's far from excellence. But it's a far cry to that consistent type of invalidation and lack of affirmation that causes a person to become really insecure. So the irony is that their search for perfectionism is not coming because they're looking for excellence, it's because they're looking for security. They're looking to find the validation that they didn't receive. So that's one critical component to address. And as I said, this can come through either parents or formative influences in our lives that were very demanding in that way, which often means the people demanding may have also been insecure. That's the way they measured their success. They measured their so-called standard was to always be perfect, to always look perfect to others, instead of it being coming from a healthy place, but coming from a filling a void of one's insecurity, and they projected that on their children. It could also come not directly from critique, it could also come from having a very insecure childhood, for example, absentee parents, who may not have been critical, but they were not around. So they weren't there to validate. So then again, the child starts looking for ways to please, for ways to ingratiate themselves to those that they're looking for love, because a child, it needs that type of validation. It could also come from things like a broken family, a divorce, a death, God forbid. All these negative forces tend to cause people to begin to compensate and try to do all kinds of things that would compensate and fill in for that lack of inner sense of contentment and success, and compensate that through trying to be perfect. We all have elements of that. I remember as a child in school, I remember maybe first grade. So, first grade, I remember there was a kid I remember I was friends with, and he was like very popular, and for some reason I felt always like wanted to be close with him, wanted to get his approval. I can't put it in those words at the time, children are children. But I do remember some things I did was like to impress him. I think back of it as childish today. Did it have any impact on me? I don't know. I sometimes think that. Do I have patterns like that have developed as I've grown? I mean, we all have elements of that we want to be liked by people that we think we want to be liked by. Why we want to be liked by them? Whatever, because they're popular, because we like how they look, we like how they behave. We look at them as some type of, I'd like to be like that person, a little envy maybe. Not necessarily bad envy, but the type of, this is something, and sometimes it's completely meaningless. Why? Because you find out later that you have your own strengths and that person had their strengths, and one doesn't contradict the other. But it's not unnatural for us, especially in our early years, and then it develops into our older years, meaning as we mature into adults, to be in that type of state where we are looking to please, where we're looking to be liked, where we're looking to do something and really impress somebody. And that, when it gets to more extreme, especially when it's an ongoing, as I said, ongoing critique or ongoing pressure on this on a child in its formative years to ingratiate themselves, to look for approval, to look for validation, if it's persistent, it ultimately creates this type of, I would even say, fantasy, or I would say delusional need to create perfection, because that's what you think is going to impress. That's what you think will be your measure, your barometer of what is success. So obviously, coming from that direction, it's not necessarily coming from a healthy place. How does one deal with that? Let's address that, and then we'll talk about other elements within perfectionism. How does one deal with that? Well, if you can indeed identify these roots that I just described, as we always know, half the cure of a problem is awareness. If you can identify that this is indeed the case, that doesn't mean it's solved, but at least you know that it's not coming from a great place. I remember meeting somebody who had this very perfectionist thing and very procrastinated as a result, which meant never got anything done on deadlines, never really succeeded because they were constantly thinking, maybe I got to tweak it again and fix it again, and end up being very paralyzed. And when we spoke about this issue, this person was completely oblivious and would not acknowledge that it may be coming from an insecure place. We're saying, no, some people are just search for excellence, some people for perfection. Now, that may be true, and we'll talk about that as well, but that doesn't contradict that it could also be driven by other factors as well. So I remember trying to plant the seed and saying, is it possible? Is it possible at all that some of it may be also driven for this compensation that I'm discussing here? Finally acknowledged it. But my point was not to win and have the person acknowledge it. My point is that they should know it in their gut. Once you know it in your gut, it changes things, because if you see perfectionism as that you're just this type of perfect human being, no pun intended, that is better than others, and therefore you're searching for perfection, then you may never resolve the issue. But if you can realize and recognize in a certain type of humility and vulnerability, yes, vulnerability, that this is possible, that it may be coming from a place that you're trying to prove something, or you're trying to gain something, then you can work on it, because that's the awareness that's necessary. How does one work on it? One firstly is aware that when they're seeking perfectionism, they have to stop themselves and say, 1 second, is this about me or is it about the product? It may not even be what the customer or whoever it is that you're trying to satisfy is waiting for. It's your own issue, so you're trying to be as good as possible. You see this a lot in relationships, where in relationships this plays itself out in a much more subtle way, but it has deep impact. Where let's say a person does have that sense of inadequacy and is looking to compensate for that, so they look for the perfect partner, or they look to be themselves perfect, and the other person likes them as they are. I've seen this very often, where one person says, I don't feel that I'm really worthy. So I said, but the person you're dating feels good about continuing with you and may even feel ready to get married. I've seen this a number of times where people say, I don't feel I'm worthy. So why is that person like you? They don't really know me yet. If they knew me real well, they'd know that I may not be worthy. But what does the non-worthiness means? And you say, okay, so what do you need to do to become more worthy? I need to perfect this, I need to perfect that, I need to perfect that. Now, not allowing themselves to just absorb the experience, instead trying to control it, which is another element of compensation, controlling a situation. So things you can control that are healthy and natural, you should control. But this type of attitude, where a person, let's say in this case with the relationship, when one person says, I'm ready to move forward with you, and the other one feels, no, it's not perfect yet, and you're not perfect, and I'm not perfect, this is where you start to undermine your own success. So in the name of success, you actually undermine your success. And this goes back to those roots. So stopping yourself, and stopping yourself requires a measure of humility, a measure of accepting realities and being real, talking to someone that's objective, and they say to you, you know what, this product is very good. Sometimes you second guess yourself, or you challenge yourself, you show it to someone else, and what the package is good. That's why you have outside advice, you get expert advice, and they say this is really good. Speaking in the world of writing or in the world of communicating, sometimes you create something, you show it to someone, they sometimes tell you it's really not good. Or they'll tell you it is good. And I've had this many times with my own work, where sometimes I felt, because of my own higher standards, at least in my mind, I felt it wasn't really adequate enough. And someone said it is. And I remember even once when I was writing something, a book, and I was really disturbed that once you start seeing your own writing, look at it for the first time, you say, this is not really it. I remember a very good piece of advice that someone who wasn't even an expert gave me in a very practical way. I showed it, and I said, it's very nice. So I said, I don't feel it's really living up to the goals and objectives and the standards I really believe in. So he suggested something simple. He says, why don't you sit down and take what you've written, take another piece of paper, and write down what are the things that you see in your writing that is not the way it should be, and correct it. And I did exactly that. And I ended up, remember, I'm over 105 things that I found wrong with the chapter that I had written. It wasn't just words, it was the spirit of it, the feeling, the sentiment, and so on. And that what I proceeded to do was correct each one of those 100 and whatever items there were. It was a great piece of advice because it forced me to get out of my own head of what I think is the standard for perfection and what I've actually created. It forced me to go, okay, so fine, you want to correct it, go ahead, correct it. It's completely legitimate to correct what you've written. Writing is all about rewriting and editing and so on. So what it does is it jolts you out of your own sense of self, because that's what the problem is. As I said before, if it's coming from the formative years and our so-called unhealthy forms of compensation for finding perfectionism, then the solution is very straightforward in that sense. Okay, get out of your head, get out of your heart, get out of your feelings, and sit down and say, okay, what can I do to fix this? Look at the product or the project or the person in the relationships or whatever it may be, and correct it on the ground, instead of in your own mind what my reactions are. So it's really separating yourself from what you're creating, which forces you to look at the good of the end product instead of what it makes me feel like. Which is again, which brings us to, of course, another driving factor toward success and lack of it. Why do we want to be successful in life? Why? So most people say that's just a foolish question. What do you mean, why I want to be successful? What, I want to be a failure? Yeah, but let's dissect it. Why? Okay, so then let's go a few of the multiple choice answers here. One answer is because success gives you inner satisfaction. You feel I succeeded at something, I tried something, it was a difficult challenge, not so difficult, very difficult. Like we feel with quizzes and contests and competitions. It makes you feel that you are a sense of contentment, a sense of inner satisfaction, a sense of success. So it's a very personal thing. That's one way to look at it. Is there anything wrong with that? I can't say completely wrong, but we'll get back to it. Another can be, we want to be liked by people. We want to show something that we've demonstrated. It's not just for ourselves, it's for others. To show people, I am good at something. Which gives us a certain element of respect. People respect us. It can also be monetary or other type of rewards that we get for it. We get paid more if we're more successful. We get more, I said, coveted respect. We get other benefits. People come knocking on your door. You're more in demand. So success in that sense becomes a driving element of your role in this world, your position in this world. Again, to say that's completely bad? No. We'll soon talk about the extremes of it, but those are two things. Then there's a third option. A third option, which we'll find does not even negate the first two. That is because you feel that you are on a mission in this world. You're driven to accomplish something. You were sent to this world on a mission. You have a calling. The calling is to use your faculties, to use your potential, to use your resources, actualize it, and bring something to the world that no one yet ever brought to this world before. To leave this world better in the corner of your place in this world than when you arrived. So that is driven not by your own inner satisfaction, it's not driven by other people's accolades and support, it's driven by a higher cause. So then success is beyond a personal matter, beyond the human matter. Success then is a obligation, you can even say, a responsibility, a gift of channeling and getting yourself out of the way and allowing the cause to be fulfilled through you. This is what is used in the language of the mystics, Hasidic language, bittul, the idea that you are suspend yourself in order to channel something greater than yourself. So the drive for success is not to fulfill some emptiness in you. Success is not just about you feeling content. It's not just about showing others and getting the benefits of being considered a successful person. It's actually fulfilling the personal mission of your life, fulfilling the divine mission, the calling for which you were sent to this world. What is the difference between these three? The first two are very subjective. Because if, for example, you feel not adequate, you feel that what you've created is not good enough, you'll keep driving yourself crazy to perfect it. For as I said before, often for not necessarily healthy reasons, even if for some good reasons, but it's about you. If it's about others, so then again, you may continue to drive yourself because some people may not be satisfied. Or they may be satisfied and you think they're not satisfied. When it's driven for the higher cause, it's not about you. It's not about you, so you get yourself out of the equation and the focus is almost entirely on what needs to get done. And ask yourself one question: have I done everything possible in my power to get it done? And if yes, there's a certain contentment just from that. And come to realize there is no such thing as a perfect offering, to paraphrase our good friend Leonard Cohen. And there's no such thing as perfection. The perfection is doing the best you can in achieving the purpose and the cause for which you were sent here, the cause of what you're trying to fulfill. Now the interesting thing is that doesn't mean that can't bring personal contentment and also satisfaction, inner satisfaction, and also satisfying and making other people happy and looking at you as a success. As a matter of fact, I would argue that if it's driven by this third component, this higher cause, not yourself, you actually will be much more content and more people will value you because it's not about you. And that even if you don't announce it, it just will reflect itself and manifest itself in what you're doing and how you do it. Because you've come with an inner confidence that I'm here to do my best. And even if it's not perfect, and even someone points out a mistake, you won't go crazy. Because if you're driven by the first or two things, and your whole value is defined by your own contentment or other people's satisfaction, then if something doesn't work out, that can drive you nuts. However, when it's driven by the cause, you say, I come with the confidence, this is what I was given my skills. I may have made some mistakes, and if yes, I will correct them. As I said before, the exercise where you sit down and say, okay, instead of feeling terrible about what you're looking at and just discarding the whole thing, throwing out the baby with the bathwater, look at it and correct, improve, tweak. Going back to what we said earlier, that the enemy of good is perfect, but not due to your own inadequacies. It's good, fine. Look at the cause, look at what you were trying to get done, and improve it. But don't deprive yourself and others from the benefits of what you've created. You can always correct it. So then perfectionism versus perfectionism and success is coming from a very different place. It's coming from a place of you wanting to do the best you can do to fulfill your calling. And it's not reflective about you, and you're not being scored in your own heart and soul or by others by how well you've done. You don't look at it that way. You look, I've tried my best to do whatever I have to do. Bottom line is you take yourself out of the equation. So then, let's get back to another personality. The personality that there's some people who are perfectionists, and not necessarily purely to compensate or purely due to their being criticized or their felt sense of inadequacies, and that came from childhood or other forces that affect them in that way. Some people, let's say certain artists, some people are just perfectionists. I mean, even in work you could find people who are working on a project and you bring certain individuals in that really take it to another level. You know, the team has created something and someone comes in and says, tweak this, this, and this, and then, oh wow, it shines. You see this all the time. Editors do this for writers. Good editors, as my agent once told me, they don't rewrite what you wrote. They write what you've done better than you would have written it. Because it's your voice. But they perfect it. It's that touch that sometimes is added, that adds. So there are people who by nature have that element of looking to really create things on excellence, not just good. And may not be coming necessarily, as I said, from a place of inadequacy. Even though it'd be interesting to make a study how many people who are that personality have also elements of inadequacies or things that they were lacking or loss or tragedy that was propelled them to achieve such excellence. But that I'm not getting into. I didn't make such a study. That would be an interesting study if it could be achieved. But let's, for argument's sake, as we're saying, there are people who by nature, not for negative reasons, by nature just have that element of perfectionism in them. So there too can take on two shapes. It can be your drive for perfection, me being perfect. Let's say there's no inadequacies involved. So fine, do it as good as you can, but at the end of the day, as I said, there is not going to be something that's perfect. So what is this person going to do? So they may just drive themselves nuts, as I said, that they say, you know what, since it's not perfect, I don't want to show it to the world. I'll continue to improve it and improve it. And they can end up not producing anything in their lives. Or, that's a strong statement, produce not as much as they could have produced because of their own need to perfect. And again, this is not necessarily from a negative place. But it's still about you. It's still about the ego. It's still about the drive for you to be the best. Whereas, let's take we'll call it, that's the egocentric drive for perfectionism and success. And then there's the cause-centric drive for perfection and success. And a cause-driven drive, I said cause-driven drive, I said an egocentric drive and a cause-centric drive, that's what I wanted to say, is then, even though you are part of the equation, because you're we'll call it the ambassador, the representative that has to fulfill the cause. However, it's not just about you. It's about the cause being met. So let's use a simple example. I'll use a very basic example. You're walking down the street, you see somebody in trouble. You see a building burning. You see someone yelling and saying, help me, help me. You could say, listen, I have to call the firefighters, they're experts. I'm not an expert. There's danger involved. Let's put that aside for a moment. Will I really know how to save that person? Now, obviously, there's a matter of life and death, and it's a matter on moment, sense of urgency. You can't wait till all the experts arrive. So you do whatever you can. Why? Because the sense of urgency is necessary. Now, if you are just about perfection and being perfect, there's no cause about it, no higher cause, then you could say, you could get so consumed with your own need for being successful, or recognizing that you may not do it and some people are better than you, that you can end up causing damage. That's just a small example that sometimes we need to just do what we have to do the best we can because of the circumstances. I use an extreme example of danger. But the same is true, you can apply that to any given situation. When it's egocentric, and egocentric, again, I'm not discussing necessarily bad or coming from inadequate reasons, egocentric, then that is the arbiter, the ego, the sense of the self. And then you'll say, you know what? I'm not the perfect person, we need somebody else. Now, there are times we do, to start to deceiving yourself into thinking, deluding yourself into thinking that you're the expert in every area is obviously not correct either. But there are many areas that you could get something done and you just don't allow yourself because it needs to be perfect. So you'll say, I need more time, or I need others, and so on. When it's cause-centric, then the most important thing is the cause has to be fulfilled. In the case of the example, to save that person's life. Let's take other causes. Causes, you meet somebody. You're on a train, you're on a subway, you're on a commuting, and someone starts talking to you about their personal life. And you realize that, I may not be the best person, but at this moment they need your support. What you need to do is you don't have to say you're an expert, you're a therapist. You may advise them actually to go call somebody that you may trust, but at that moment they may need that they may need your heart, they may need your compassion, they may need your support, and even just validation. They just need to lend a sympathetic ear, These are all examples of cause-driven. Instead of looking at am I doing the perfect thing? Looking at what is needed at this moment. It's not about you, it's what you're needed for. Like the famous story with the Rabbi Shneur Zalman, the Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, the Alter Rebbe. Someone came to the Rebbe, to his spiritual mentor, and said to him, please, and he gave him a grocery list of needs. He needs this, he needs health, blessings for livelihood, blessings for his children, and so on and so forth. And after his long list, the mentor, the spiritual master, Rabbi Shneur Zalman, said to him, this is all that you need. Have you thought about what you are needed for? Very different. So there are things we need that are our needs, and there are things we are needed for. We need to contribute. This is what we were sent here to give. And this is a central component in true success in life. Success, real success, this is the formula, is not about whether you are succeeding, is whether the cause is being fulfilled. Now, when the cause is being fulfilled, you will succeed. But your success does not necessarily fill the cause. Sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. So what you want it to be is cause-driven, not self-driven, and then that satisfies the self. Some people will argue, well, why can't it be self-driven and it also satisfies the cause? You know what? You can begin with that. No problem. Begin with that. But you'll see there'll be limits and yourself will get in the way. Because once you're satisfied, you'll say, you know what? I don't really need to do more. Cause-driven focuses you not on yourself, but on the object, on the objective, I should say. On what needs to get done and what your role is in getting that thing done. And real success in life, as has been stated by many wise people, is basically the understanding that it is not about focusing whether I will be a happy person. People who pursue happiness because they want to be happy do not find happiness. Happiness is doing the right thing, and in turn, what emerges is a sense of contentment and happiness. So happiness is not an end in itself, it's a result of doing the right things. You'll see that rule across the board. And I'm not talking about happiness short-term instant gratification that you feel excited or a sugar high that you get for the moment. Not talking about that. We're talking about true happiness, lasting. So this brings us back to the discussion. So in other words, whether you're a perfectionist, you're wired as a perfectionist, or perfectionism comes from an inadequacy, or whatever reasons, other reasons, the counterforce to all of that is recognizing what is good for the cause, what is right for this purpose and this and the thing that needs to get done. The focus on the objective, on the person that's not yourself. And in turn, you will, of course, receive all the benefits and rewards that come from that. So it's a whole different approach to the entire topic of what drives us to succeed, what drives us to become perfect or try to be perfect. It's a fascinating, Maimonides writes, this is a central theme in, you'll find it in the Talmud and Jewish thought in general. The idea of doing the good thing should be done as best as you can. Like when you bring an offering, it should be min ha'tov ha'yafa, it should be from the best, not the inferior. Many people will say, you know what, I'll keep the best for myself, and the gift I give to someone else will be from the second batch, or the offerings in the temple. Or things that we do, for example, we create sacred objects, whether it may be a mezuzah, a Torah scroll, or other things, to do it from the best materials. The idea of also, there's the concept of the first fruit offering, to take the best of the fruit and bring that as an offering. Now, what is the point? The point is that you're focusing, yes, on something being the best possible thing. Clearly, on a certain element, I can't say perfect, but as close to perfect as we can achieve. And yet, it's not about taking it for yourself, it's giving it. It's giving it to others, it's giving it to God, it's giving it to the world. Because you recognize that the perfect is not about me. It's about doing it in the best possible way. And when you really believe in something, you want to do it the best possible way. It's like you can invite two people to your home as guests. So when you give them the minimum, or the other person you lavish upon them, you give them a full course meal, and you make them feel good. Like in charity, and Maimonides also spells out different levels of charity. In my book, Toward a Meaningful Life, on the chapter on charity and wealth. Charity and, the chapter on charity, wealth, and productivity. I'm forgetting myself the names of the chapters. There's a chapter on charity. It talks about you can give charity to someone, someone needs something, you help them. You could also help them with a smile. You can help them with support. Showing them I'm not just giving you something, but I'm also giving you part of my heart and soul. My compassion, my sentiments, my support in any possible way. That makes the charity obviously in a much higher level. The first is also charity, but the second turns it into something much more beautiful. So it's beautifying, which is another word of saying perfecting as best as possible everything that we do that's holy, that's sacred, that's good. Absolutely. So we don't think in terms of, let's do it in the minimal way or just the bare basics. Do it in the most beautiful way. But what are you doing? You're beautifying the world. You're beautifying your contribution to the world by saying, I'm not just giving it to you. I'm not just gifting it to you, but I'm gifting it to you with as beautiful possible way that we can do it. And this again is driven by the cause-centric approach, which which is also reflected, I should add, if I may, in this week's Torah chapter. It's a very interesting episode that takes place. It's a famous story, the Exodus from Egypt. Everyone is familiar with the Exodus from Egypt. Then comes the next stage of the story. They finally leave Egypt after 210 years of oppression. They arrive at the river, at the Red Sea, I should say. And here they are stuck because the Egyptians are pursuing them. They change their minds and they want to take back their slaves. And they're stuck for the first time between a rock and a hard place. What do? So alluded to in the verses, as the Talmud tells us, the Jewish people broke into 4 groups of what to do next. It's a tremendous lesson in life that's related to what we're discussing. One group said, you know what, we're stuck here. It wasn't worth the whole effort, let's return back to Egypt. Resignation, basically, surrender. The second group said, no, that was hell. Better to die. Let's jump into the ocean. Suicide, escapism. The third group said, let us pray to God. God saved us, He'll save us again. Let him save us. And the fourth group said, let's go to war. So you have the surrender, you have the escapism, you have the religious option, and you have the war option. Go to war. What they do, so Moses turns to God and says, what should we do? Which one? And God negates all 4. Return? Absolutely no option. You will not return there. To jump into the water? Absolutely not. That's also not an option. To go to war? I will fight for you, God says. And to pray, He says, why are you crying to me? Lama titzuk. Why are you crying out to me? So Moses says, what should I do? God responds, Vayuso, move forward. I took you out of here. I told you to move forward to Mount Sinai, to the promised land. Move forward. Fifth option, moving forward. And what happens? Nachshon ben Aminadab moves forward and the sea parts and splits. What is the lesson to us? Tremendous lesson. We're all faced with challenges in life. And sometimes we're stuck between a rock and a hard place. So one option is, it's too difficult, let's resign, let's surrender, and you just go back into your own slavery to others because you don't feel you can be independent, if you don't feel you can overcome these challenges and difficulties. Okay. The second option is suicide. Not necessarily literally suicide, but basically it's another form of surrender. But instead of surrendering to others, you just give up on yourself and you throw yourself into the sea. The third option is you escape into prayer. I'll just pray and let God take care of everything. And the fourth is to go to war, to fight. What's wrong with all these? The first 2 are pretty obvious what's wrong with them, because it's basically surrender one way or other, whether it's surrendering to your masters or surrendering through jumping into the sea and giving up on your life. No. The third option, the problem is, yes, it's very nice to pray, but God also gave you resources. He gave you skills, He gave you tools. So you're just turning to God and that's it. What about you? And the fourth option, war, you can fight the rest of your life and just become a warrior, which many people are. A shark, a warrior. And you'll never have a moment of peace. The approach that God was saying is stop focusing on yourself. Very nice philosophical approaches. And they exist in every society and every situation. You'll always find these 4. But at the end of the day, what happens? You get paralyzed, even trying to determine which of the 4 are right. Do we return? Do we give up? Surrender? Do we throw ourselves into the sea and just give up that way? Do we pray? Do we go to war? Move on, move forward. What are you focusing on yourself and your doubts? You were told something, move forward, cause-driven. There's a cause to be lived up to. And when you drive to the cause and don't focus on your own fears, which may lead to the resignation or the surrender in one way or another, when you don't focus on someone else is going to save you, and you don't focus on just going to war, do what you have to do. Is it perfect? It may not be perfect, but you know what will happen? Something will open up, a door will open up because you have made a move. Better to make a move than to be paralyzed. Better to make a wrong move than to be paralyzed. How much more so a right move? As I don't know where I saw this, some advertisement, that the greatest risk of all is not taking any risk. A lot of people just are afraid of taking any risk. That's the greatest risk of all. So you see here the story of our own personal lives play itself out. So this isn't just a discussion about perfectionism and success. It's really a discussion about life and its challenges and what success means. Another thing I want to address is the fear of success many people have. They're afraid of success. This way they could always say, you know what, I didn't try my best. It's really a fear of failure, to be honest. But it's called the fear of success because, as I said, you could always say to yourself, I didn't try my best and maybe I won't succeed. It's really, right. Now the fear of success could also be that once I succeed, what do I do then? However, all this is again about me, about us, about our own fears, our own insecurities. So the key thing is always to focus is on what needs to get done. Often you need help to do that because sometimes you don't even have the eye on the ball because you're so subjective and so entangled with what needs to get done that there is your own inadequacies that come into play and you become a factor. You'll find the best coaches of athletes, for example, or other coaches, help the person get out of their own head and do what you got to do. You're a talented person. Use your talents. Don't focus on yourself. You'll see whether it's in sports, for instance, you see you're focusing too much on technique. Yes, train, but then get your head out of the way and just allow your trained reflexes to work a certain way. Too much overthinking doesn't allow the fluidity necessary from the brain to your hands or to the arms, to the eye and hand coordination or other factors of implementing. So the critical thing is, yes, train, do what's necessary, get yourself in the right frame of mind, the right conditioning, but then comes the point where you need to act, where you need to execute. And execution should not have that type of complete focus on yourself. You're focusing on getting the job done. And those that are experts, that have learned to master their art, master their whatever expertise it is, you'll see when they get to the moment that they have to do it, there's a certain calm. It just flows, it channels through them. That doesn't mean it happened overnight. They prepared a long time before to be able to do that. But that's what expertise is. And that's why it's so comforting to be in the hands of an expert. You feel like you're in the hands of a master. You bring them something, an idea, a challenge, a dilemma, or whatever it is and they suddenly give you a clarity. Or they act in a way that's so clear that you say, wow, it's like a fish in water. You don't even see a splash. You don't see any resistance. You just see that flow. Now, that doesn't mean, as I said, that it always comes easily. They may need to work on it, and they may need to tinker as well. But it comes with years of that type of channeling, and they're getting themselves out of the way. They're driven to the cause. What do I need to get done to make this work? As opposed to myself. Think of it in a very basic way. Someone comes to you, let's say you're a watchmaker, or you're good at any other thing I'm just using something with hands because it's just easier to explain. And there's a problem with the gadget, with the machine, with the mechanics of it. You look at it, and let's say you start focusing, oh, can I really do this? This is so delicate, and I'm afraid if I do this, I may break something. That's not the way a master thinks. A master has done it many times. Now they'll prepare themselves. They'll have the right tools, the right precision, be very careful, obviously. But they have that type of confidence. Because they're not focusing, can I do it? They're focusing now what needs to get done. Whether it's a heart surgeon, whether it's a technician, whether it's an engineer, whether it's anything, any of us doing what we need to do, whether it's a cook in the kitchen, a chef. That's what they do. Now the experience that they have, and that has led them to this place. So now they can focus not on themselves. The earlier stages, obviously, when they were being trained, your trainer will show you, hey, you're doing this is the bad type of approach. Here's a better technique. Here's a better method. But then you come to a point where once you've absorbed, you've assimilated that technique and method, now the focus is on getting the job done, on the job. Now, someone that doesn't have a technique and method has to first work on developing that. They can't just focus on the job. But as I said, there are circumstances where you have to completely focus on the job. Take parenting. Who's been trained to be a parent? You learn on the job. No, there's no such thing as a perfect parent. Even after you have the job, even after you have many children and the children have grown, you learn on the job. So a parent's going to say, listen, I don't know how to do this. I've never done this before. I know people who don't want to have children for that reason. They felt that their parents were terrible parents. They don't want to be terrible parents. I've never done this before, but there's only one way to learn. You jump into the water like a swimmer. You have to get in, and you learn on the job. And the key is, if you keep focusing on your own inadequacies, yes, you'll fail. Or you won't do a good job. But if you say, here's a child that needs my support, show them love. The child is crying. The child needs support. Don't focus on yourself. Focus on the child. That's how you become a good parent. It's a single, most important ingredient. Everyone looks for those best-selling books, how to be a better parent. Best parent. Don't focus on yourself. Focus on the child. Obviously, that can be elaborated upon, but that's the key, the gist of it. And in every area of success and perfection, you'll find that same formula. Vayuso, move forward. Here's the situation. You're in it. You're placed here for a reason. You're the one right now in it. Do what you have to do. Do the best you can. Bring in experts. Bring in others. But don't let the job not get done because of that. That's the key. So you continuously improve. It's a work in progress. And yes, do it as perfect as you can, but don't let perfectionism, your version of perfectionism as it reflects on you or on others, become an impediment. Get the job done. Now this may sound simple and easy. It's not easy because, as I mentioned at the outset, there's the reflexes. There's our patterns, our routines. We're not trained to think this way. Not just not trained, we don't focus in this fashion. But I hope what I've said can give you the tools to begin. Or if you're already there, to improve even better, because this too is a work in progress, even what I'm saying right now. And it's the key is to focus that you feel that you're serving a need. I'll just tell you one tip that I use a lot when it comes to writing. You have what they call writer's block. What do? You can't get something out, and you have a deadline. So deadlines are usually very efficient ways to get something out of you, but sometimes nothing's coming. What I do always is one thing and one thing only, and I do this even when there's no deadline, is I think, what need am I filling when I want to write a piece, an article, a book, anything? What need? And you have to create, sometimes you have to create in your mind the crisis, the problem, the dilemma you're trying to resolve. Because then what the focus is, it's not about me and my great ideas, it's about what am I doing to serve this need? And trust me, life has many needs. So all you have to do is imagine a human condition dilemma and say, okay, what am I going to do about this? And that's what draws out your creativity and your energy that allows you to go serve that need. So suddenly you realize that is the cause that's more important than you. Writer's block is a lot about you. You're having a block, but there's a cause to be filled. And suddenly if there was a crisis, God forbid, or a challenge, what would happen? The challenge would get you out of your own head and your own thoughts and your own feelings of needing to succeed, and you'd serve that need. That's the way to approach this entire subject matter. So how to succeed without being perfect is by understanding what success is, understanding what perfection and what it comes from. Succeed without being perfect means driven by the cause, and then you will be as perfect as you can be. But perfection is not the end in itself. The perfection is part and parcel of getting the job done. So, my friends, I want to sign off with this, that God should bless you all to be as perfect as you can be, to be as successful as you can be, but not with a focus on perfection, seeing perfection and success as an end product, a result of the efforts that we put in. Your efforts should be perfect. That you can say with sincerity and integrity, I've tried my best, I've done my best. We have an expression when we say in the morning, actually several times a day, one of the prayers, talking about the love of God, it says, with all your heart, with all your spirit, with all your might. But b'chol maidecha also means with all your all. Ma'id means a lot, with all your a lot. So when you say something is good, Tov ma'id, very good, with all your very. I know that doesn't come across that way in English. So we should all be perfect in our very, in our effort, in the the investment we make, then the results will reflect that perfect effort as well. Everyone be blessed. This has been Simon Jacobson. It was not on class, on location, it was online because of my travels. But I will be back in New York hopefully next Wednesday, and we will continue and resume this both on location and online. Please share, like, communicate with us, engage with us. Interaction is what we thrive on. As I just said, to me, it's all about the interaction. It's not about getting ideas out there. It's about ideas being gotten out there and having its right effect and dealing with and addressing the cause. So please communicate and give us that feedback, thoughts, critique, anything you like. This has been Simon Jacobson, Meaningful Life Center, www.meaningfullife.com, and we'll be back every Wednesday. Please visit our site and our social media platforms where you can find plenty of material that can help you all grow and thrive on this journey toward a meaningful life. Be well.